at the end of the day, you have this, untapped pool of talent, which consists of women, people of color, etc. And so, at the end of the day, like if they have when they have the skills, then they should absolutely be welcomed into the industry. Because there was some statistic that was completely ridiculous. It was something like only 3 to 5% of venture capital money goes to women.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening, and welcome to Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, Digital Media Manager here at 43 North, and this is a very, very special episode of the podcast because it's the first edition of Latitude Live, the live edition of this podcast, held right here in the incubator, recorded on March 28th, 2018, with a crowd of about 50 people, actually, here to listen to my bad jokes. No, what they're really here for is artificial intelligence, and we had just the perfect guest for that topic. 2017 43 North winner Iba Masood from Terra AI. She is one of the leading experts in artificial intelligence, so I couldn't think of anyone better to host for this topic. So let's not waste another minute with me and jump right into the live edition of Latitude. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the first edition of Latitude Live edition of the podcast. How many people here have heard the podcast before? Thank you. All right, so when I do trivia, there will be only a few of you answering the trivia questions. Fantastic. No, just kidding. Real quick, wanted to thank our sponsors, Citizen Bank. Thank you so much for helping us out. A round of applause for Citizen Bank for everything they do for people in Buffalo. Expo Market on Main Street for providing all the food. And, of course, our long-standing partner, Flying Bison Brewery. They've been helping us out since day one, and we all enjoy a cold beverage. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors tonight for helping us out with the first edition of Latitude Live. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to see a grown man struggle to record a podcast in front of about 50 people. Should be fine. No. I'll be bringing out Iba Masood real quick. I'll have a nice conversation with her. We'll open it up to Q&A. So while you're listening to our conversation, think of questions, because I'm going to go around like any good host and put the mic in front of your face and make it awkward for everybody. No. So, without further ado, Iba Masood.
Thank you. Are we sitting, standing, sitting? Okay, there we go.
If it gets confrontational, we will stand up. I don't know, depending on how the interview goes. So, however, before we get started with you, first round of trivia. Each episode, for 20 episodes, I have mentioned a fictional company. What is the name of that fictional company? You get a t-shirt. So, see us after we have a t-shirt. So, anyway, Iba, as we start out each episode of the podcast, give us the quick pitch of who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Iba Masood. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tara. Tara is an intelligent product builder. What that means is we help companies large and small build out their software using machine learning. And so it helps with tasks, milestones, as well as project scoping. And then it also assigns contractors that can execute those software projects.
We'll get to that for me, though. So you're from the east of Buffalo, or west, depending on how you spin a globe. Tell us where you're from.
I'm from Pakistan.
So really, it depends on how you spin the globe. Anyway, come on, guys. These bad jokes are going to be going all night, so you're going to have to eventually laugh.
You have to give them some credit. So yes, originally from Karachi, Pakistan. I was born and raised in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and spent majority of my educational and professional life there. It's just, I think I was, I actually started using my first PC. I was four years old at the time, and my dad was like, one day he would constantly say, one day I want you to be the next Bill Gates.
That's fair.
And so, at that time, as I was growing up, I thought to myself, what is the probability of a Pakistani female who was, born and raised in a lower middle class, we were lower middle class in the Middle East. What is the probability of that person running a company headquartered in Silicon Valley? And so, considering how the chances were obviously stacked against me, one of the things I did do at a very early age was learn the American vernacular. So if you notice, my accent is American, and so this was through training on various American sitcoms.
Which ones, to be specific?
Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Let's start there.
There you go. Can you do the intro?
Of course I can. How are you even asking me this? From West Philadelphia, born and raised on the playgrounds where I spend most of my days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all, shooting some b-ball ups around the school with a couple of guys who were up to no. Yeah, I can do it.
She's got it. I mean, come on, right?
This was all completely unscripted, so I wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Nate.
Anytime. Happy to make it awkward for both of us. So, what made you fall in love with tech as a child?
So it was, I think I was around 11 at the time. I built my first website in HTML. It was, embarrassed to say this, it was a Harry Potter fan club. It was called Potterific. But I'm still a diehard Potter fan. But anyway, but I built this website. HTML is very simple. But really, I think the true technology wizard is my co-founder. So Sayed is a roboticist. I met him freshman year of undergrad, and as soon as I met him, I was like, okay, this is one of the most brilliant people that I've met in my entire life. And so in freshman year I was 16 at the time, and so what happened was we met and we had just kind of been like brainstorming a couple of ideas for different websites. So like the first thing that we built was when I just graduated out of college. We built this like very simple graduate careers platform. So it was like helping Arab youth in the Middle East, Arab non-Arab youth find jobs, and this was like during the Arab Spring. So we built it. We built it with like about $200, and just that was our seed funding, and we just basically put it out there, a simple landing page, and that was actually the very early genesis of Tara. So that was like some of the first technology that we had built that was essentially enabling recruiting in that region. But the plan was always, and the dream was always, to move to the U.S. And build a global company. And so it really started when in 2014 we got a $10,000 grant from MIT, and so I packed my bags. And just moved over to Boston, and thank God Sayed followed to co-found to actually build this company, and so we then got into Y Combinator 2015, and so on a tour, and both of us were on a tourist visa.
Sure.
At that time. So we were hoping and praying that we'd be able to stay in the US, and so that's really how the company got started.
You memorized all my questions ahead of time, didn't you?
I'm so sorry.
She just blew through like 5 questions on me, so no, I'm just kidding. No.
Don't worry, we'll have plenty to talk about.
We've got plenty to talk about. Well, if not, we'll have you rap more sitcom intros. It'll be great. So you mentioned that the dream was always to come to the United States. Why? So from my point of view, I've always been here. So, I don't have that perspective of dreaming to go somewhere, except to Buffalo, of course.
It's fascinating. I think America does an amazing job in terms of marketing the American dream, and typically people have this idea of people from the Middle East that most of us are. There's obviously there's a specific image, and so when being from the background that I'm from, and and where we're originally from, I think for me it was really just understanding where disruptive companies are being built. And where can we find the talent to actually build this disruptive company? So it was that was one of the forefront of our questions. But then also it was kind of a dream as well, because it's funny, we had kind of like grown up reading Paul Graham's essays on entrepreneurship, on technology entrepreneurship in particular, and then even like looking at the early classes of YC, primarily see white male Stanford
me
grad.
You see me when you see photos of startup guys. Yeah.
So the probability of us getting into YC, we honestly thought it was impossible. So like the first time we applied, we didn't get in. Second time we applied, we didn't get in. The third time we applied a month after the deadline. So the probability of like getting in at that point is about 0.2%. So I think for us it was really just the idea of this meritocracy. and that there, that the ideals that I had was that that no matter where you come from or your background, you can make it in this country, and so this idea of the meritocracy was really, I think, what pulled us to take that big risk and come to America.
I think putting it in perspective, for someone who doesn't always have that, I think it's just great to hear that story of our marketing plan is working here in America. That's fantastic. Now, so you said you were working on work visas, temporary work visas, correct? You just got your EB-1 visa. Explain what that is. I'm going to disappear for 2 seconds because part of podcasting, folks, is that constant fear that your recorder has stopped recording. And so I'm going to check on that for 2 seconds while you explain what the EB-1 visa is.
Indeed. Thank you, Nate. We actually first started from going from the tourist visa to an O1. So the O1 is the Extraordinary Ability Visa. Sayed and I both applied individually. So the Extraordinary Ability Visa requires that you are in the top 2% of your skill category. And what that means is you essentially need to have documentation that proves that you're indeed at the top of your field. And so it was after YC when we had gained customers, some following, some users, that we were able to put together a 400-page document detailing just our time in the Middle East, actually, and how we were going to make that same kind of dent in the US. But putting together a 400-page document, that's easier said than done. It was incredibly difficult, and so, but happily, in those, we applied and then about 2 weeks later, we got the O1. And then what we decided to do is we're like, okay, let's take it a step further. And I'm glad we did because we're like, okay, I think our future will really be cemented here if we get a green card. So the green card application, that EB1 is top 1% of your skill category. Mm-hmm. 800, that was about 800 pages. It definitely wasn't easy because I had to literally show from birth how I was extraordinary. No joke, like there was even, nursery transcripts to a certain extent. And so I just cannot, it is, I don't think it's easy. I think it's difficult. But I do believe that, I do think extreme vetting is already in place. Let's be real here.
Extreme vetting. So certainly sounds like a very long task. You said 800 pages, detailing your entire life. You and some of your team have gotten the EB-1. Someone else who's also gotten the EB-1 is First Lady Melania Trump. Any comment on that? You're top 2% in your field. Do we know?
I'm sure she is also top 2% of her field, Nate. So let's not comment.
We're not. Yeah, but this is not a political podcast.
I'd like to stay here in this
Neutral.
country. Thank you.
The NSA is listening. So, why artificial intelligence?
I think it really started from a fascination with, Sayed and I have both had this very early fascination from a young age with automation. I remember when in freshman year we had these very early discussions on how a lot of work that we do on a day-to-day basis is rote manual labor, and can it be that we can achieve a higher consciousness by doing much more creative tasks rather than some of the rote manual things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. So I think it was just that early conversation that we had that kind of cemented our early ideas within AI. And then, with Sayed's background in robotics, I think it was just kind of a natural progression for the company to start using machine learning. So initially, we were just using big data algorithms. When we first, so the first genesis of Tara was building an algorithm that would look at graduates. So in Boston, it would look at graduates that were from Ivy League universities versus graduates from state-level universities. And so we were looking at was there a significant difference in their abilities and their skill levels for recruiters to place a premium on graduates from Ivy League universities? And we found that there really wasn't any. So we were like, okay, could you look at a programmer's existing code and assign a score to their overall skill level? And so that early idea and that very early algorithm that we built was what kind of got us pulled into AI, essentially.
Will AI eventually replace a subpar podcast host? That's me, guys.
we should record the laugh track so
Yeah.
listeners know that there are people
Yeah.
laughing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm going to fill that in later.
So I think I think there is definitely a real fear with AI automation and essentially machine learning, either replacing certain roles and certain jobs that are essentially manual and rote in nature. The way I see it is I look at AI as augmentation. So I think and this is just my overall opinion, but so take it with a grain of salt. But the way I see it is, with typewriters, when they first came into existence, people thought that early dictation methods were much more superior. But then typewriters came, and then we had personal computing, and then business computers as well that kind of changed that. And so if you look at the evolution of technology, you typically see that very early pieces of tech, what they're essentially doing is they're augmenting certain roles, and then what's happening as a result of that is that roles are changing. So the very early diction, the folks that were doing early dictation then became typists, and then from the typists we had administrative assistants, and then from there, so roles are evolving. So the way I see it is that people today that are doing rote manual tasks in project management will evolve to doing product management, which is much more, creative tasks, much more related to like creating user stories, figuring out product market fit. So the way I see it is that AI is essentially going to evolve jobs and roles, and what that will enable is potentially even mid-level managers, how their roles are going to evolve. I think that's really a question to note, because can we have systems that can actually monitor progress and monitor the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, which is essentially the role of the mid-level manager.
So why do people fear AI?
I think the fear really stems from the idea that, am I going to be replaced by an entity that could be faster, smarter, and just much more efficient at my role than I am. And
Plus,
I think
we're all stubborn in our roles. We don't want to change. We just want to do our job and leave.
And I think it also comes down to, if you look at, there's a lot of early research being done in universal basic income, right? And so the idea that we should all have, and I think Canada is kind of like pioneering that. But with early UBI, I think what we're going to see is roles are going to essentially evolve, which they already are. At the end of the day, all marketing roles now expect you to have some level of digital marketing experience and background, right? If you don't know what SEO is, then you could be replaced. So, no marketing roles today ask you to create a marketing plan, for example. The way I see it is that careers and roles evolve with technology, and so I think there shouldn't really be a fear. What there should be is the willingness and yearning to actually educate yourself about what's going to happen in the next half a decade to the next decade.
Well, I think even on an analog level, as people who listen to the podcast know, I think I bring it up pretty much every episode. My previous life in TV, I wrote a story, I produced a story, I shot a story, I edited a story, and then I pitched other stories. So I had 5 jobs in one, which 20 years ago, that was 5 separate jobs. And I think all of us in the audience today can look at what we do and think, oh, I'm actually doing 3 or 4 different jobs for one salary. And obviously, I think that's, as you said, that's kind of where that fear of AI comes from.
And I think what would be really interesting is that, as you mentioned, with these 5 roles that you had at your earlier job, could some of those roles be augmented by technology or augmented by a system? And could that have helped you have more time to write more stories and pitch more ideas? So, I think that's really how we should be thinking. And then, of course, AI is also ubiquitous, right? At the end of the day, our Gmail or any of the email applications that we use have some form of spam filters, and those spam filters are learning from whatever we're marking as spam. So, seeing that kind of advent of ubiquitous AI really enables us to understand that. And at the end of the day, by the way, AI is not that smart. It's still very early, and you still have to have the right set of training data that needs to be that really needs to be pristine, which is a lot of work for data scientists. So if you actually think about the amount of work that goes into building anything that is remotely intelligent and only in one very specific task, it's actually pretty difficult. So, we're just thinking about like the kind of Terminator scenarios that
my next question. How soon before Skynet? That's all I want to know.
So we
6 months, guys. 6 months till Skynet.
Yeah, as someone who actually works in the field, I mean, what I can tell you is that it's still incredibly early. It takes a lot of time and effort to build something that is specialized and in one task, and we're still pretty far off from general AI. But I think that the people that are going to come up with general AI are most likely going to be the ones that have the pristine data sets. Even with Google, even with the data sets that they have, again, not pristine. They still need a lot of data scientists to scrub that data. So I think it'll be interesting to see who's going to rise and become the leader in this space.
So why is Terra AI working to solve the problem that you're working on? Because there can't possibly be any history of discrimination within the workplace about someone not based on their merit and their skill, but other reasons, right? It's never happened in the workplace.
I think just as what our vision for the company is that we essentially want to enable people to build software no matter their technical skill. So the idea is that Tara is essentially recommending you how to build the software, but not only that, it's recommending the API integrations or just in general little tools that you can use to build out a simple website. But then it's also recommending people that can help you execute that vision. Put it simply, that's really all it is. It's man and it's machine. But the idea is, as it recommends resources to help you build your product or your software, that layer of recruiting is essentially removed because you're not going through a recruiting process with the developer. The system is assigning the developer, and so that's really what excites us because at the end of the day, within recruiting processes, recruiting is inherently biased because the recruiter typically tends to place their own unconscious biases within the recruiting process. And so I think that one area that automation and algorithms in general can have a major effect is in places where there is inherent bias. And so the way it works is as soon as you start a software project on Tara, not only does it give you step-by-step instructions on how to execute that, but then it also starts to give you the people. And those people could be veterans. They can be moms that are that are at home trying to restart a development career. They could be developers that have never even attended university. And so and you don't know at the end of the day who's being assigned. So once they get assigned, then you see the output of their work, their actual productivity on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's what excites us because we're seeing more and more candidates get assigned to these contract roles that otherwise would not be hired by the company full time.
So who's using Terra and what do they think?
Well, I hope they think positively, but
what's the feedback?
Great, yeah. But I mean, I think one of the things we like to do is we consistently talk to our users and consistently get feedback. I think that's really important as when you're an early stage company, you're constantly iterating based on feedback, and you need to make sure that you're talking to your users so that you're not developing in silos. And so overall, our customers are very vocal. Which is great. That's what we want. If anything, if they experience a bug or any kind of feature issue, they're like immediately, telling us and letting us know, which is great. In terms of our customer set today, we've seen success with Fortune 500 companies, as well as small startups. Startups that are looking to just, they might be one founder, two founders, looking to just get their idea off the ground and have, some level of execution. So people are building like these MVPs, just very simple prototypes. But then larger companies are also building like very core technology. And in that case, they're usually like augmenting their existing in-house engineering team. Because I mean, in today's day and age, you can never have enough engineers. So just the ability to like activate these, pools of workforces that can just immediately be assigned to a project is valuable.
Before we shift gears, trivia time. What is the phrase I use to open every episode of Latitude Podcast?
What is good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're in the world?
Yes, close enough. Well done. Thank you for listening. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening. Welcome to Latitude. It's the inflection I have. You in a T-shirt. Alrighty. So shifting gears, you mentioned a few weeks back that Buffalo had the best Pakistani food you've had in the United States?
Indeed.
Where?
No doubt. Clay. It's called clay handi. They serve it in clay pots. It's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
How does it compare to?
I guess the difference is they serve it in clay pots.
Okay, that's fantastic.
But it's very authentic. I mean, just
Yeah.
because it's when you're, cold evening in Buffalo, you go and they're open till like 12 a.m., which is
Perfect for a
amazing.
startup person, right?
And so they're open till late. You go in there and you have everything served piping hot in those in the clay pot handis. So it's great.
So you guys won one of the prizes, 2017 43 North competition. Then we moved you in the middle of January to Buffalo, which is sorry.
January 1.
Yeah, sorry about that. But how's the experience been moving your team from the West Coast to Buffalo?
I think for us, the way I like to look at Buffalo is that it's a big city, but with a small town feel. Which I think is, the community has been incredibly welcoming, and then just being able to at a moment's notice, just ping anyone in the community for advice. I think, or even just whether it's on the recruiting side, whether it's just trying to, or whether it's where should we have dinner tonight. I think just having that access, I think has been really valuable. And we were looking for our East Coast headquarters, and I think it's been one of the. And anytime I ask team members, what's really attracted them just about Buffalo in general, it's really been the community. I think everyone's been incredibly supportive.
So cheers to the city of good neighbors, everybody. I think that's a great testament to that. So your West Coast company, you guys went through Y Combinator. Does everybody in the audience know what Y Combinator is? Yes? No? For those who don't, why don't you explain what Y Combinator actually is?
Oh, sure. So Y Combinator actually had their first IPO, Dropbox,
Yeah.
and so YC has graduated some of the, some of the most leading technology companies that today. They were behind the success of. They're typically like the first check or the first investor in a lot of these companies, and that was the case for us as well. And so they were the first investor, Airbnb, Dropbox, Reddit, and then these massive enterprise as well as consumer technology companies. And
2016 winner Hire Me as well.
yes, exactly. And in fact, some of the other 2017 winners as well are part of YC Squire. And so I think what YC has really created is a formula around launching great products. And they keep saying, make things people want. And I think that's important because we tend to sometimes develop in silos and we forget that, do people actually want this? Do people actually want this feature or this product? And I think it's really important to continue to ask those questions as you go through the process of building.
So why did you guys, after going through YC, which is only like a 3-month, blitz accelerator program, correct?
Yes, exactly.
You were guys at that point, looking for funding, looking for the next step? Well, how did 43 North come into play for you guys?
Well, actually, we graduated out of YC and we didn't raise much money. Like right after YC, so YC we got the $120K check. Right after YC, we raised about $400K, which is traditionally pretty low for a company that's graduated out of YC. And I think a lot of that really stemmed from the fact that at the end of the day, I do think that when you're a female founder from the background that I was from, at the end of the day, you need to show significant traction in order to raise any money. So what happened was when we raised very little money after YC, we just kind of heads down, kept grinding and just basically moving the needle on our product. And then right before actually we got into 43 North, so when we applied to 43 North, we were basically considering investment offers. And then as we went through the application process, we then suddenly raised it was $2 million. So it was 2 million. So we were at about 2.4, 2.1 actually, to be exact, 2.1 million when we presented at 43 North. Then we got the 500K, and then we raised another 500K from existing investors. So our total round was about 3 million for our seed. So I think with 43 North, a lot of our customers are based on the East Coast, and we want it to be, in California, that's 6 a.m. for us, when we're hopping on these calls. And so actually being here, we've had better access to our customers on the East Coast, and then it's just the time zone difference is a lot better. And I think Buffalo is great, especially with West Coast companies, I think whoever's listening to the podcast, what they should consider is that you're going to need, there's just no doubt about it, you're going to need a second office. And so I think with what Buffalo really provides is that community, that's one. And two, with talent just being all over Western New York, but then also there's even access to talent in Waterloo, Toronto as well, that, it's funny, I was just talking to a couple of candidates that we're interviewing that are, so we've been interviewing candidates here in Toronto and et cetera. But one of the candidates we interviewed in Toronto, I actually even offered him that he could move to San Jose, to our San Jose office, and he immediately said, no, I'm going to move to Buffalo.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and he said, it's just, it would be such a quick drive for him for Toronto. And then
Only
I said,
4 hours to Toronto.
But hey,
traffic.
it's better than an 8-hour flight,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
so it's kind of like seeing that, like, that was really powerful for us, because we were like a lot, and then even a lot of our international talent that we're recruiting are also preferring Buffalo. I mean, it's just the cost of living as well. You have to. I mean, people here own homes. Mm-hmm. That is like. That is.
They don't own homes out west.
We do not. We can. I mean, like a tiny little bathroom costs like $800,000 in San Francisco. So like just the idea, it was so funny. Like I remember when we first came, everybody was like, "Oh my God, people actually have housing
with a yard and a driveway."
And you don't have 7 roommates. I mean, that concept was so alien to us and to me. And so we're like, people can actually have. I mean, I think the living aspect is I think the cost of living aspect makes a difference.
You were alluding to this in the beginning of your answer. Women in tech and diversity in tech is a huge topic right now in any news story you see. I know you've built your company around that issue. As a leader in the industry, why does this issue have to keep going? Why do we have to keep that conversation going? You mentioned, given your background, given the fact you're a woman, given the fact you're from the Middle East, you weren't able to raise money. Which I think if you literally put me in your role, and I know nothing about anything you're doing, I probably could have raised that money, right? Sadly.
I do think things are changing, which is great. I mean, now at this, not to sound braggadocious or anything, but it is. I mean, in the last few months, like the number of investor requests that we've had has been like pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. And so what I've seen is people. I mean, at the end of the day, like we hear about the college dropouts that have raised like $50 million off the back of an idea, right? And that used to happen pretty. I think that the next decade is actually going to be very different. So the next 3 to 5 years, we're seeing investors do much more due diligence. We're seeing investors be more open to the idea of having founders that don't traditionally look like Mark Zuckerberg. And it's funny, Paul Graham, founder of YC, actually said this. He said that there was this one founder that I was interviewing that looked like Mark Zuckerberg. And my mind kept thinking that even though he was not very good in terms of like what he was doing or his idea or overall, but I kept thinking he was good just because of the way he looked. And it's a really insightful article. You should read it. But he basically was saying that we kind of reflect our own unconscious biases onto the person that we're talking to. So, there was just an article I think just yesterday on today morning, CNBC. Laura Kolodny, one of my favorite journalists, she published an article about she's the CEO. She basically raised 4.5 million seed and gave birth the next day. So I mean, that's amazing. Like
yes, very much so.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like that does show that I think the industry is changing because people are becoming more aware of this. That at the end of the day, you have this untapped pool of talent, which consists of women, people of color, et cetera. And so, at the end of the day, like if they have when they have the skills, then they should absolutely be welcomed into the industry. Because I mean, there was some statistic that was completely ridiculous. It was something like only 3 to 5% of venture capital money goes to women, and so that's pretty.
Ridiculous.
It's
the word.
It's pretty ridiculous. I look forward to the day when we are no longer referred to as female founders. We're just referred to as founders. I think that's really the day that we can, that we can say that we have true equality.
I think that deserves an applause, right? I think that's.
Thank you. But I think until then, I'm going to. So it's funny. Like earlier, I never used to refer to myself as a female founder, and so I used to get a lot of emails where I'd be dear Mr. Iba Masood. People just assumed if it's an enterprise tech company, the CEO is typically male.
It must be. Yeah.
But then now I've been incredibly vocal about this, and I actually now like to say female founder because I do believe that we're still not at the point yet where I can remove the word female from my name.
Alrighty. I've asked enough questions. It's up to you guys now. Who has a question? And I'll let you think for another 30 seconds. We do have a trivia question. Who is the only person to appear twice on the Latitude Podcast? Well, I've been on 52 episodes. So the only non-host. And somebody mumbled it.
Yep. It was Nick. Right
Probably the person who this person now works for. Yeah, you can't win. John Gavigan, former executive director at 43 North. You guys got to, your Easter homework is to listen to all 52 episodes of the Latitude Podcast. All right, who has a question for Iba? Coming on back. What's your name, sir?
Don Ingalls. We'll meet you halfway here.
Fair, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. I'm not in the field at all, so I may have missed this, but could you explain how you find the developers that you match with the projects? And you said some could be working at home or wherever, and they're not in the field necessarily full time, and how that works.
Sure, thank you. So typically, where we find our developers has kind of been some pretty diverse networks. When we first started, we were primarily going to university campuses and just attending career fairs and basically onboarding computer science graduates. So that was like our first set of users. And then we kind of then started going into open source forums and open source repositories. So a lot of these forums and repositories have rankings of developers that actually show some of the work that they've completed in the past, and what sort of projects they've. So GitHub, for example, has a lot of these repos, and you can actually see some of the top ranked developers depending on like the number of repos they've forked into, number of starred repos, etc. So we actually looked at that data as well, and started just manually emailing a lot of those devs to basically get onboarded onto the platform. And we also looked at freelance marketplaces that already have several freelancers onboarded. And one of the things I actually personally did was I interviewed roughly about somewhere between 175 to 300 freelancers in a period of about a week. So this was like very early in building
so short
the company.
days for you, right?
But what I was trying to do was try and understand what sort of challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. And it's really fascinating because you find that freelance developers typically make about $200 per project on average on freelance platforms. And so they need to do anywhere between 10 to 40 projects to make some form of a livable income. And we thought, what if you could only do one project on a platform and make an extensive income? So those were the kinds of attraction points that we kind of used with the early users and early developers to get them to join our platform.
And the coding industry is like you said, pretty competitive. The top coder was just here in Buffalo recently, and again, it's a ranking system. All these coders seem to be competing to be the best in the world, right?
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about the overall field is that a lot of people tout it as being meritocratic, but that's not the case. I mean, so again, going back to when we were building out the early platform, then what we also did is we interviewed the companies that were hiring these developers, because when we first started Tara, we thought that we would be a recruiting platform to find full-time developer talent. But we found that only a very small portion of these developers were being considered for these full-time roles. Typically, they were, they had the Ivy League degrees, they had they had completed all these past internships, and we're like, that cannot be the entire universe of programmers. And when we did our research, we found that there was this massive pool of untapped hidden talent. This is honestly not only the case in programming, it's in every field. We constantly get questions from folks from other fields, when do you think you would want to activate this for marketing, for sales, for others? We think we're a long ways away from doing that, just because it's very difficult to analyze someone's skills qualitatively. Like quantitatively, you can still do it via an algorithm. But I think it'll be interesting to see like what company comes next in solving that problem.
What do you think will be, if let's say in 5 years from now you guys have mastered what you're doing with the coders in the development industry, where do you think the next just natural progression would be for Tara?
I think what's also really exciting is the ability to predict bugs and issues before they arise in programming. And so, we're again looking at certain data sets where we can essentially be able to do that for our users that utilize the platform. And then another area that we're really excited about is essentially enabling because what we've seen is about 8 out of 10 founders are not technical. They're building these, technical solutions, but at the end of the day, they don't have actual coding ability. So I think like that is a really exciting market. And then not only that, but also, Middle America is now like it's still very early. Yes, they're using Airbnb and some of these platforms, but a lot of them have all of these different ideas that they want to see in the real world and see executed. So, for example, like one of our earliest customers was a brick and mortar store that was getting their website live for the first time, and they were like, "We have no idea how to do this. We don't know if we should use WordPress or all of these different platforms." And so what the system did was it recommended a pathway in terms of how to build that website and found them a freelancer in about 24 hours. So their website got built. It was in a 6-week sprint, and it was built from start to finish. This brick and mortar store, they got a quote and they didn't have to worry about anything on the technical side. And so now they just know how to manage their platform.
Which is crucial for small business because they themselves don't have time to learn how to code or build a website themselves, even though so many platforms like build it yourself. It's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of these platforms are actually not very easy to use either. They tout themselves as DIY website builders, but you still need to bring you still need to have somebody technical who's kind of taking you through the nuts and bolts of it. So I think that's what's exciting. I think we really, right now, our early adopters are folks that are still, somewhat technical. But I think what's really exciting is being able to activate the next generation of doers that would actually be able to build just about any type of software through Tara with having no technical knowledge.
When should that next generation, for those who do want to get into the coding development industry, because I have a 5-year-old at home, when should I start preaching coding to her?
Well, I think starting early is important. So I mean, Sayed and I both when we were much younger, we started with Visual Basic. That was the early language with when you were just using MS DOS pretty much. And so today languages are obviously much more complex and your kids are going to have I think they're going to have an amazing time just starting. But I think a starting point would be HTML. Just very simple HTML courses. They're on Khan Academy, Udemy, and they have very kid-friendly courses as well. So I think just starting very simple with an HTML, and even just starting where I did just coding a
fan site.
Yeah, exactly. Just building a very simple fan site. So,
who else has a question? I'm coming on back. How are you? Who are you?
Good. My name is Markus Holzhauer. I'm a radiologist here in town. And thank you for sharing your story. I wanted to ask you, I have a concern. I face in my profession a lot of AI applications. And in regard of AI, I have a certain issue. Computers are fed by a lot of data, pristine data, as you said. And with the Facebook breach right now, there's some concern that countries who might have lack or not as much of an individualized safety or are more authoritarian might have a much better access to big data. Like in China, they are building a citizen score, whatever that means. So it's a very fine balance where you could envision that governments or countries where they have a more rigid approach, just using the data, will develop much better computers than societies where protection is in a bigger role.
Great question.
Yeah.
I think firstly, you're absolutely on the nose about China being way ahead of us. I mean, if you look at just the number of engineers that are graduating with, math, statistics, and so, for example, like when we hire ML engineers, we look for we look for extensive quant and math abilities, and the number of math graduates that are coming out of Chinese undergraduate universities is staggering. So just seeing like the pool of talent that is available in China, I think what I think is probably going to happen is yes, you have countries where there might be some form of authoritarian rule. I think it's really going to be the people that will come forward and say that, okay, this type of data access is fine and accurate, and I approve, but this other type of data access is something I do not approve. And then the other thing I think will also probably happen is I think that we as individuals can sort of control our own our own sets of data pools and potentially even sell them to the highest bidder. Like I think that's where things will start to get really interesting, where individualized data sets will become such a a rare commodity that I think people will be able to trade them in some form of an exchange. I know that sounds a little bit that might sound like something from science fiction, but I think that's honestly just my overall hypothesis. Like I think we should protect our data, we should own our data, and what the implications of this essentially are is that we should consider our data to be something that is unique to us, and be very careful as to like what we're authorizing. It's so funny, that Facebook data breach, say it like a couple of years ago when Facebook was rolling out all of these multiple applications where you as an individual could give access to all of your friends' data by authorizing an app. I remember during that time saying it was like, this is going to be a massive data breach in a couple of years. Just wait and watch. And look what happened. So
is there issue with the folks who are developing AI? You mentioned unconscious bias earlier with just generic hiring. Is there a possibility of programmers also having that unconscious bias?
Yes, absolutely.
And then now you have an unconscious bias within an artificial intelligence being, so Skynet.
So one of the things that I think is really important for programmers to do is to de-bias their data sets. So what that means is, so for example, I believe that the English language is inherently biased. And that's a problem, because if you're training your overall algorithms on the English language, which obviously is the case. So, for example, if you're trying to train an algorithm to differentiate between or you're trying to ask an algorithm to basically determine if a term is male or female. And then if you give it, articles, newspapers, or just the data sets, or let's say the last 50 years of media, what happens is, and this is really interesting research. It was published by University of Texas in Austin, I believe, or University of Austin. Sorry, let me just correct that. But the research actually showed that if you train these data sets on the English language inherently, what happens is that the algorithms become sexist. They start to assume that nurse is female, programmer is male. And so there's actually quite a bit of research out there that shows you how to de-bias data sets. That does mean, again, you need bigger data sets. You need to make sure that you have diversity in your data set. And it is difficult. It's not an easy, it's easier said than done. But I think, and what I'm seeing is that the more female programmers that are coming out into the field are actually much more aware of this problem. I'm seeing that people of more diverse thought and just diverse leadership are actually considering this an issue and are talking about this, like, at programming conferences, at data science conferences. And I'm excited about the fact that people are starting to identify this as a problem and actually tell, their engineering teams to consider making sure that their data sets are unbiased. So, I'll give you an example. So Face ID on the Apple iPhone. So say it. Whenever he uses Face ID to unlock his phone, it unlocks. He gave it to his brother, and his brother used it, and then it also was unlocked. And then I'm like, does that mean that any brown man that uses your phone would be able to unlock the phone with Face ID?
There. Yeah.
So again, it goes back to data sets, right? So, you need to make sure that the training data isn't, so it's again, it's a hypothesis I have, but I think AI, when we build it, we tend to mirror it to our existing society. And I think what would be really interesting is if companies start building AI that is built on a utopian society that is much more idealistic in nature. And so if we build algorithms that are, have these de-biased data sets, we're essentially building algorithms that we believe are going to be mirroring a future human race.
All right.
I hope that makes sense.
Who else has a question? Yes, sir.
Maybe on the topic of conscious bias, do you know the demographics of your developer pool, and do your algorithms make more of an attempt to match developers from sort of underrepresented demographics to projects?
Great question. So this was actually like an early consideration that we had as a team. When we first started, we're like, are we going to be a diversity equation formula that where people that are much more diverse of nature are going to have a higher probability of us being assigned to projects? But then there's a problem with that, right? Like, how do you determine if someone is diverse? Some people may say that, I have Italian heritage, so I'm diverse. And so that when we thought about this very, very early on, we thought that at the end of the day, what should determine is, we believe in a meritocratic society, and that if your past ability shows merit, then you should absolutely move forward in any sort of recruiting process. And so that was the ideal that we had from the get-go. Now going back to our developer pool, what's been interesting is that looking at your past projects and your performance in past projects has enabled our system to bring more developers that have never attended university, that are women, that may be people of color. So we're looking at a contractor, like our total user pool and total contractor network, we're looking at about 35 to 36% women, which is pretty significantly higher than the number of women that are in the technology field in general. So my hope is that the fact that this is a meritocratic play, that it will bring more women and people of color into the programming field, because at the end of the day, I think the most important element is, because this is just from my own research, I found that the ability to get into an Ivy League university cannot determine your future career path, or the fact that you're getting access to some of the best careers. In a lot of cases, it's also determined by if you're able to afford that Ivy League degree, right? So I think so for us, our platform today does not place a higher weightage on people that have the diversity criteria. It places a higher weightage purely on the basis of the past projects that you've worked on. So for example, if let's say you score a lower, let's say you're not yet ready to be assigned to projects, our aim is that our platform will actually show you how you can improve your skills and how you can actually improve your score by, for example, doing some side projects, by doing or by just learning about this existing language or framework, and then kind of like bumping up your score over time.
Kelsey Hanks, one of the most brilliant minds in the PR world in the 716, has a question, I believe, as well.
I work at a PR agency. I just wanted to know if we could hear the Fresh Prince rendition one more time.
Oh, wow.
Way to put me on the spot.
We can just loop it in the intro. We can just keep looping
let's
it.
do that. Great. Love it. Yeah.
Any other questions with one of the most brilliant artificial intelligence minds in the United States?
Please, just.
The beautiful woman in the scarf who I'm married to. Any questions? No, you're good? Okay. How's the host? Is he good? Is he? So? He got a haircut. I mean, come on. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Iba Masood from Terra AI. Wonderful podcast. And that does it. But before we jump and stampede out of here, a few house cleaning items. And for you listeners of the podcast, you know what's coming next. How do you listen to the podcast? Head on over to Podbean, Apple Podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, any other podcasting app you have, search Latitude, the 43 North Podcast, and download it. If you have a Google Home, just say, "Okay, Google, play Latitude, the 43 North Podcast," and shockingly, it'll work. Because I tried it the other day, and it stunned me. I didn't think it would work. Please share episodes. The more people who listen to this podcast, the more predominantly featured Buffalo is. And that's why we're here. please leave a review on iTunes, because the more reviews we have, the more predominantly featured we are. And that's what we're looking for here. And the last piece of trivia question. Each week I ask you to leave a star review on iTunes. How many stars do I ask you to leave? 5. There you go. It's 1 out of 5. 4.5. Thank you, Bethany. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. The live edition of Latitude, the 43 North podcast. We will be doing this every month. The next one is April 25th with Andrew. It's you, right? Yep. Andrew Martenko from Sun Care. They're doing a great thing for folks who like to enjoy the beach and are worried about their sunscreen wearing off too soon. So stay tuned. We'll be sending out an invite for all of you to join us again April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m. here at the Incubator. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again. And have a great night. Cheers. Hey, I know I already closed the episode out live here at the Incubator during Latitude Live, but I just want to thank Iba Masood from Terra AI one more time for a fantastic episode. I know this episode was a little bit longer, but it was a very unique event. And you know what? It's not the last time we're doing Latitude Live, because on Wednesday, April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m., here at the 43 North Incubator, 640 Ellicott Street, downtown Buffalo, we have Andrew Martenko from 2017 43 North winner Sun Care. You know, it's getting nice out. The sun is finally high in the sky, and you're probably wondering, how do I protect myself this summer on the beach? Well, you know what? You don't want to go to the beach this summer without Sun Care and Spot. What is Spot? Well, you're going to have to wait until April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m. here at the 43 North Incubator so that Andrew from Sun Care can tell you all about Spot. See Spot run, see Spot protect your skin from the sun. Thanks again for supporting the podcast. And remember, head on over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review. The more 5-star reviews we have, the more people will hear this podcast. And we're having great traction with the podcast lately, and let's keep that momentum going. Share this podcast with your friends, family, your coworkers, anyone who's interested in the Buffalo startup business scene, anyone who's interested in startups, entrepreneurship, or in this case, for this episode, artificial intelligence. We try to bring on some of the best guests that we can find, and it just so happens many of them are right here in Buffalo. Thanks again for listening to Latitude. I'm Nate Benson for 43 North. We'll see you at the next one.